So our first order of business today is to discuss and to review a policy that you can find in the binder that you have before you. For members of the public, I'm going to share my screen so you can see what we're looking at. In order for when a commission comes together, we're required by statute to set the terms for establish a policy for when it would make sense for folks to participate remotely. And we have actually Wayne St. Pierre. I just realized we did not let you introduce yourself. Do you want to come on mic and introduce yourself because you're a member of the commission as well?
Yeah, Wayne St. Pierre, RSU 39, Transportation and Facilities Director.
Okay. Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen to review the policy that we want to look at here. But in order for us to meet, there will be times where, especially as we're trying to meet to do this vital work in the next 6 weeks or so, where we could, in some parts of the state, have something like some weather that might prevent a member of the commission to join in person. And so statute requires that we adopt a policy to sort of establish those conditions when we would meet remotely. So I'm going to pull that up and share that with the group here.
It was sent out yesterday to this group. Did everybody have a chance to review that policy? Yes. Are there any questions about the policy? If there's no questions, and
first I just want to make sure that I'm sharing my screen so folks who are joining remotely are able to see as well.
Yeah.
All right, so what the policy essentially outlines is when we would be meeting remotely and defines the means for what we mean by remote methods and you know, how we would be taking votes as well as making sure that how members of the public could also participate. So what we're looking for is if people have had any questions to raise those right now. Could I get a motion to?
So moved.
Okay.
do we have a second?
Second. Steve Marquis moved and Chris seconded. Could I get a vote to adopt the policy?
All those in favor, just raise your hands.
Yes. Just for the record, I think we have everybody around the table. Wayne, can you come on mic and let us know whether or not you are able, whether or not you vote for the policy?
Yeah, I'm for it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Wayne. To clarify, can you raise your hand if you are one of the appointed members on this committee? Because I think Deb and Jason, you are not, right? So the people who are able to vote on this are the members of the committee. So just for Jen, for your count, right? All right, thank you, everyone. Great, thank you. I'm going to shift over to sharing my screen. I'm going to turn this off at this point. We're going to shift to now looking at our agenda. The purpose of the meeting, we've already kind of run through our introductions very quickly, but I want to first take a moment to acknowledge why we're here. Obviously, we are all concerned about student safety and making sure students come to school every day safely and that they get home every day safely. And we had 2 tragic deaths this year. Braden Callahan, a 12-year-old in Rockland, and Simon Gonzalez were both killed, a 5-year-old in Stanage, were both killed in November and December earlier this year. And that necessitated us coming together. But I want to make sure that we take a moment to just think about those 2 young children and that we sort of ground our work in their memory and in our ongoing commitment to ensure that every child gets to and from school safely. And I know, given the experience of the people around this table, the expertise that you all have, I know that that is so much a part of the commitment that we have here today. So I want to share or just have us take a moment in your binder. You see the commission, the executive order from the governor establishing a commission. And the executive order has set out pretty tall responsibilities for us to kind of move through some important work in the course of our times meeting together in order to have a report back to the governor's office and to the legislature by April 30th. And I'm going to outline some of the things that are required and are called for in our purpose. And that is to review current statutes and regulations related to safety standards, protocols, and school bus driver training to ensure clear communication and requirements for all districts. To produce an update set of best practices for school bus safety and disseminate that to all districts. To identify changes and improvements needed in school transportation rules. And to identify school bus safety features that can be installed, upgraded, or replaced, including door anti-pinch sensors and controlled crossing arms. Ensure and assist school districts in effective communication of school bus safety information to students and families. Confirm that school districts have a process to complete on a semi-annual basis school bus safety training checklists, and identify training needs for bus drivers and mechanism for this training to be provided to school transportation units. The goal of the commission is to address all of these. And we hope to take on this tall order over the course of 4 meetings. The purpose of today's meeting is really to ground ourselves in what do we currently have, what exists in statute in 28, in 20A, in 29A, as well as what rules are in place. There are going to be 2 rules that we focus in on that are Department of Education rules. And then we also are going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about a current bill that is before the Transportation Committee and had its work session just this week, LB 2159. So we're going to do just a brief summary. The outline of today's meeting is we're going to spend some time, about 40 minutes or so, going through a lot of that information. We have a lot of experts around the room, so we are just going to make sure it's sort of high level, again, to ground ourselves in what exists. And as you're listening to the information that we're sharing and reviewing, what I hope members of the commission will do is sort of think about, what do you notice about what is there, what needs clarification, and whether or not there are pieces that you see as gaps that can address some of the areas that are outlined in the executive order. For the purpose of our commission. So for instance, if you see something that needs to be clarified in rule. And then once we do that, we want to make sure that we do allow some time for public comment. And so we're going to make that time available. And then we'll round out the meeting at the end with some time to sort of talk about next meeting and sort of some agenda setting. Our thinking, Lieutenant and I have met a few times with Jason King, sorry, and Jen Belanger, who also works at the Department of Education, to sort of think about how we lay out our 4 meetings. And our thinking is that this meeting is sort of the high level, what do we have? The next meeting, we're really thinking that meeting number 2 will focus on the specifications of buses. The 3rd meeting will focus on training and some of the training and regulations that are in place. And we hope that will allow our time in the 4th meeting to be spent really talking about what recommendations we have. So that is at this time sort of our roadmap for where we hope to go. We recognize that we can iterate and sort of shift as we learn and hear from you and from members of the public to sort of inform our work and make sure that we're putting into place what's going to make the most sense to keep children and staff and everyone safe. So yes, Jen Belanger.
Zoom question?
Yes.
I'm seeing an option that says transfer to Zoom room. Would you like me to try that and see if it comes up on the screen?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. I didn't want to do it without like.
So for people who are maybe not able to hear, Jen Belanger is a specialist from the Department of Education. She is helping us to sort of help us with a little bit of technology, and she's going to try to shift the way that we're using Zoom right now to hopefully have a better experience for people who are joining remotely. the code from me or from
Do
the,
5210.
What was that?
Try 5210.
hopefully that's not your PIN number.
No.
Okay.
No, that's what I use for the photocopier.
Public knowledge now. It's locked.
Nobody can get at it.
Jen, is that not working?
It wasn't letting me input anything, so we'll
Okay.
try one more time.
Okay.
5210, you said?
Yep.
No, it's not letting me input anything. I don't know why.
While we're working on that, I'm going to project up onto the screen information about Rule Chapter 81 and 86. And Cheryl Brackett, who is the Department of Education's Transportation Specialist Coordinator, is going to kind of walk us through some of that information. For members of the public, I'm going to try to share my screen. Wayne, can you give me a thumbs up if you're able to see the slideshow?
Yeah, it's up there.
Terrific, thank you. All right, so Cheryl, take it away. If you could project your voice a little bit to make sure that the microphone picks you up.
Okay, chapter 81 lays out a lot of safety training for school bus drivers and students. And the purpose of it is to provide minimum transportation safety regulations. Student riding, students need to have be trained twice a year, once each semester, on safety practices, and they need to be instructed as to how to get off the bus and get on the bus twice a year. And they also have evacuations twice a year. And it all has to be posted and kept in record. So the SAUs have to keep the emergency evacuation drills and the emergency drill records certify that students meet requirements to safely evacuate a school bus. So the instruction will cover loading and unloading and crossing techniques. This is really important so that they know how far in front of the bus they have to walk, they know where the danger zone is.
Next slide.
So school bus driver training. This also sets out training. Entry-level drivers have to have a minimum of 40 hours training with classroom and behind the wheel. They also have to have at least 16 hours of annual training in the classroom and behind the wheel. And you also need to keep records of that too.
When you say you also need to keep records, do you mean the school administrative unit or the SAU?
Yes,
Okay.
the SAU. Make sure that you keep a file with who was there, what you did, when it happened. The information could be used from Department of Labor and other places, okay? Daily inspections, this is a requirement. You have to do a pre-trip and a post-trip vehicle inspections every day. It's very important too to keep records of that. Prompt reporting of safety defects. Make sure your bus drivers know that if there's a defect in the bus, it needs to get fixed. Bus clear inspections after each run to confirm that there are no students on the school bus. And I know some of the school buses have the buzzer that you have to go to the back of the bus, shut it off, so it makes you go out there. Immediate reporting of any student remaining on the bus. So if you find a student that fell asleep on the way home, they'd have to take and let the garage know and call the parents. Things that are prohibited on the bus: alcohol, marijuana, tobacco use, possession, weapons. The exception is on-duty law enforcement and military. They can't bring a weapon on the bus. Year-end reports, transportation directors are quite familiar with this. We have an EFT 21 where we track records of safety and training report, and that's where that 16-hour comes in. If you train your bus drivers for at least 16 hours, it's going to be on this report. And there's also the EFD 24, which tracks mileage and operations. Compliance and records retention. And here again, you do need to keep your records, like I just mentioned earlier. You need to retain all your safety records, and they should be available to the department to review anytime we want to. State subsidy may be withheld for late or incomplete reports. Contracts require department to review compliance statement.
I'm going to stop there for a second. That was Department of Education Rule Chapter 81, which really goes over the school transportation safety recommendations or outlines of the rules that in rule there. Are there questions from members of the commission about what you saw? Yes.
Are the 2 reports that you mentioned, are those submitted annually to
Yes.
the Department of Education, or are they just
Yeah, it's the Department of
when
Education
requested?
on NEO. No, they have to do those annually, so they have from July 1st until October 30 to finish those reports. No, I'm sorry, October 15th.
Do you find that you're getting good compliance with that?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you getting good compliance with them turning in these reports? And if they don't, what is the follow-up to that?
Well, the problem is if they don't track their mileage for the buses and they ask for bus subsidy to buy a new bus, if they haven't met the requirement of 125,000 miles and at least 10 years old, then they're not going to get a new school bus. They won't get subsidy for it.
So they're held accountable through the subsidy program, the purchasing of school buses,
Yes.
but there's no teeth within rule or
No.
statute
No.
to require. Okay.
I just want to stop for a second. I know Jen is working hard to see if we're able to have a different viewing experience, but I want to just check to make sure that we did not. Wayne, can you come on, Mike? Are you still able to see the slide in front of you?
Yes, everything looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This one is different room.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So it's just our experience that's changing, but that's okay. All right. So any other questions? I want to kind of make sure that we touch on. We'll definitely be coming back to this rule chapter, especially in the 3rd meeting when we're talking about regulations about training and about student safety and those kinds of things, as well as reporting and some of the mechanisms for ensuring that there's compliance. So those are certainly things we can come back to. Yes.
Cheryl, can you, the 40 hours of training, is that from a Department of Education perspective, is that post licensure? Or does that include
New drivers.
licensure training? So in other words, a driver comes to the SAU with their CDL and appropriate school bus endorsement, and then the unit would conduct an additional 40 hours of, say, localized training on procedures and routes and stuff like that. So that's not qualification training, that's
No.
localized how we do business
Exactly.
here training.
Yeah, I mean, buses are different. Safety equipment is different from our school
Yep,
buses.
yep.
You have to know how to use it. So, and when I put my new drivers on, I'd send them out to each town
Mhm.
on one of the experienced drivers from each town. What the district looks like, tried some different buses. I know when I was driving, we had standard buses, and I had double flush some buses. So,
Sure.
you need to know how to use it.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, we're going to continue moving on to, we're looking at,
Can I ask
yeah,
one thing?
sorry, good. Yep.
In the policy, you said daily inspection,
Yes,
not per trip.
it's pre-trip. So you check your bus out in the morning.
Right,
And fill out your sheet.
Right.
And then go out and then do a post-trip.
right.
Every time the bus gets used, you should do a pre-trip.
I understand that,
Yeah.
because that's what I did, but I believe it says daily. It doesn't say per trip.
I'll change that.
Okay, just so.
No, I'm glad you said that.
Can I just clarify, is it in rule that it says daily versus, we'll go ahead and check that, say if it's a rule discrepancy there. But we, want to clarify if it's trip or daily.
Let's keep going on
Yeah.
that, but the pre-trip, post-trip. Last I knew it was they had to retain the pre-trip, post-trip for 3 years. Is that still, what is it's nothing, it doesn't say anything. How long
I
you're supposed
usually
to
tell
retain
schools 5 years,
that? 5 years.
and the rule does say daily, so that's gonna have to be a change in the rule.
Back to that post-trip, there's many, I've done probably over 20,000 compliance inspections in the unit on buses, a lot of districts. It amazes me when we're doing inspections, how many people get off a bus, driver gets off the bus, and somebody jumps on that bus and doesn't do a pre-trip. How many that get off the bus and don't do a post-trip? So that's a big problem that I've seen over the years. So how we address that, I think that's something moving on that we probably should.
That's a good idea.
And Deb is correct. We do need to make a change to section 7 because it's section 7.1 pre and post trip inspection. But then section 7.1A says school bus drivers shall perform daily pre-trip and post-trip.
Because I know that sometimes when I was driving, somebody else would use that bus on another one after me.
Right.
So you don't know what happened in between.
So I think, as we are getting into, things that you're noting, discrepancies in the rule, the language of the rule itself, we're certainly noting this, as we're listening. But also, if you can make note of it, we will be coming back and spending more time on Rule Chapter 81 in a subsequent meeting. But, definitely want to keep note of those things that are inconsistent, but also things that you wonder about or things that you see opportunities to improve or to provide, greater specificity or compliance opportunities. Anything else with 81? We're back to the slides up here working again. So Cheryl's going to take us through chapter 86.
Chapter 86, it's a short one, but it's the uniform bus specifications. There's a lot of specifications. We had a team go to Des Moines this past year and work on the National Congress. It was just recently updated, so sometime hopefully next year the legislature can pass the new specification book, and we'll probably have some new stuff for them to work on too. So this is riding safety practices instructions twice a year. I talked about it with 81. We want students to know how to unload, load, know about the danger zone. It's really important. It's 10 feet all the way around a school bus. And then we want them to have the cross techniques, make sure that bus drivers nod their head, not wave their hand. Emergency evacuation drills done twice a year, usually through the back door and the front door. Okay. And SAUs must maintain training and drill records. That's really important to retain those records. And I'm sure if there's an accident, those records will be brought up.
Yeah.
The exceptions, we don't make our schools buy white roofs. We don't really, some do. We don't have air conditioning in state specifications. I've been to other states in conferences that have been hot, and there's been air conditioners in the bus, which is so unusual. No overloading buses, it's prohibited. Escorted cross procedures not adopted. So I get a lot of calls when people want to know if somebody can walk their child across the road. And we don't have any kind of laws for that. And then the activity buses, which is gaining in popularity right now, have to follow the same 49 CFR 395.5 as regular buses. But they don't have overhead lights. They can't stop in the road. They're meant to go for door-to-door activities, not home to school, school to home.
Those that don't know, maybe spell out what CFR stands for. So,
Go.
this is commercial federal regulations, so that's what that is referencing.
Yeah, thank you, Jason.
Can I pause this for 1 second? I'm gonna try a technology thing that Jen is recommending. I'm sure it's gonna go perfectly.
No, not at all.
It's worth a try.
All right, let me just try.
There we go.
There we go. All right. All right, so just checking. Wayne, I'm sorry, I'm gonna continue to just keep bugging you, but can you let us know if you can still hear us, if anything's changed with audio?
Everything still looks good.
All right,
Sounds good.
all right. I'm gonna go back to trying to share my screen. I'm sure that's gonna go perfectly as well.
We're still
right.
getting audio through this though,
Yep.
instead of the speakers.
We're gonna live with that right now because it's gonna be better the next time. It's gonna be so much better. Can't wait. All right. Ready for the next slide?
So the key exceptions are all new school buses must have an onboard video system with a minimum of 4 cameras. And I think cameras are a lifesaver. Continuous recording required on all interior cameras. We do not have a law that has to have seatbelt installation, but it's an SAU decision right now. If you want to have seatbelts in your school bus, you can.
But if they're so equipped,
If you're so quick, you have to use them.
you're
Yes.
required to use it.
Good point.
Thank you.
Good point.
When we're talking about the key exceptions, are you saying that it is an exception that all new buses have to have the onboard video system, or there's an exception that they don't have to?
They do have to have. it.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Maine.
In Maine. Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, they have to have the cameras, minimum 4, and they have to keep them continuously recording while the bus is running.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
I think that some of the most dangerous aspects of school transportation are actually cars coming or going in either direction. Is there a requirement for exterior cameras in the front and back of the bus to catch red light violations, which
No.
is absolutely frightening?
No, and actually my hairdresser called me this morning to say that he saw a woman go through buses lights and followed her license plate. She tried to run him off the road. So it does happen, everywhere.
Those are some of the things that I have on my list when we get to those things.
Yeah, I mean, you can buy cameras too for your stop lines. That's good technology.
Yeah, and the good news is in the 131st legislature, they passed a law to allow the enforcement through those cameras, where prior to that it was prohibited. So a lot of the school districts that I work with have got those for that purpose.
Yeah.
To clarify, the 4 cameras that are on the buses that are installed, are they ever able to catch any of those, or is it a totally separate camera that needs to be installed?
They are able to catch it, and actually a layout we've been working with a camera system that we use. We've got even some enhanced, in addition to the 4 that have like bird's eye view from the back of the bus. So you not only get the license plate, but you get the whole view down the side of the bus, which has been for evidence for the police that we work with very effective.
And in our next meeting 2, we'll be talking more about bus specifications. So a lot of that information related to cameras and then some of the other technology.
Technology is getting better, that's for sure. Yeah. Purchase requirements. So the Department of Education goes out and we get bids from the vendors for school buses to do the bidding process for the schools. But if they decide that they want to go out and do bidding on their own, they need to follow the rules of what the state does, okay? Or they can just take and use low bid on our website, okay? I go out every 3 years to get new bids in, and bid specification cannot exclude any manufacturer. So if somebody wants to bid, we can't exclude them for any reason, okay? If their buses don't work very good, we still cannot exclude them. Usually when the bids come in, say like if the companies all bid on like a 77 passenger seat with diesel, the state will give a school district the low bid. So if you don't want to get the low bid bus, you want to buy from someone else, we're only still going to give you the low bid, the bus that was lowest. Okay. SAUs may exceed minimum specs with justification to the department. So if the school wanted to have seatbelts, or 3-point seatbelts, they could do it. Okay, even though it's not yet a specification.
Wayne, I saw you
Cheryl?
come off mute. Did you have a question?
Yeah, Cheryl, when was the last time we went through? I know I was on the panel when we did the original specs to go out to bid with,
Yep.
but I think we're due for an upgrade on that for our specifications that we want bidded on.
Are you talking about the ones that we did at the National Congress?
No, I'm talking about the bids that we send out for the vendors to spec the bus at our minimum.
We just went out to bid back this past last spring, so that the new bids were available July 1st of 25, and it's for 3 years. So what I have up on the website are the bids that are current.
Okay, my recommendation is before we go back out to bid, we get a panel together and look over our specifications before we put them out to bid.
That's a good idea, and it's something that we should do soon, because now that the National Congress gave us the final copy in December of what was done, that's going to have to go before legislature to be passed. So if we want to do some sort of specs for Maine that's different, we're going to want to do it at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, good point, Wayne. Thank you.
Cheryl, just an outsider's question, I guess.
Okay.
The last bullet, school district or SAU that wants to install something above and beyond the minimum standard, having to justify that to the department, this incentive to pursuing a higher standard, or is that to garner funding, or what is that? To me, that seems slightly odd.
Yeah. It's just so that we're aware of what's going on.
It's not a permission submission,
No,
it's a declaration.
No, it's a local control.
And generally, what is that justification? What does that look like? Do they submit a form? Is it an email? How do they let us know that?
They just usually give me a call to see if it's okay.
But it doesn't change what they get in terms of they're still getting a low bid amount. They'll pay for it
Right.
locally if they're going above and beyond.
Right, and they're still following our specifications that we have in the state and federal government. School bus standards sets the construction and equipment requirements. That's in the specifications. It ensures that buses meet Maine specifications and mandates proper signage and lighting. So if you look in the specifications, and I can send it to all of you, it's many, many pages. It puts out like what size a lettering has to be outside the bus, what colors it has to be. It sets all of that up so that it's in the specifications. The vendors are supposed to be following those specifications. It's just like we were talking about the sensors. We have a specification that we have sensors, but it doesn't really say what kind of sensor they have to install in the buses. They do that themselves as long as they follow the specifications. So we can't pick a company that we think would be better.
Cheryl, when you're talking about the school bus standards, are those all defined in 86 or are they defined somewhere else?
There's standards that are defined right in the specifications from the National Congress. We have position letters in there. We have it directs you on if you want to use like a non-conforming vehicle. It tells you what you have to do. Wayne, do you want to speak on that because you came to the National Congress?
Yeah, all the school bus standards is done at the National Congress. We can either adopt them, their specifications, or we can go above them if we so choose. But it gives you all the specifications that meet for the federal government. And then if any state wants to go above or beyond, they can.
Yeah. Like the NCST basically wrote some guidance on seatbelts. And they basically, we didn't pass it, that buses have to have it because it may be cost prohibitive to some schools. But we recommended that it's good practice to use the seatbelts. So if you look in the big specs guide, you'll see all kinds of different things there for transportation, taking care of equipment. I know Wayne suggested bringing up a backup camera on school buses. He brought that to National Congress. That was his idea. It's just a lot of different things about everything, and if transportation directors want to look through there, they can find some good training material.
So can I just add something to that? Mm-hmm. For people that are listening that aren't familiar with the Congress, I just want to explain it a little bit. So the National Congress on Student Transportation meets approximately every 5 years. They send 5 delegates or more from each state. These delegates have to discuss school bus specifications and operations, and they vote. So some of the most brilliant minds in the country get together to determine what are the best practices, what are the best procedures, and what's the best equipment and how to spec these out. So when you hear us referring to the National Congress, I just wanted you to be aware it's not a body that meets and creates statute. It's a body that meets and creates best practice and recommendations, kind of like the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, or AMVA. And then each state decides if they're going to create their own standards, or if they want to take advantage of all that hard work that was done by some brilliant minds and say, rather than go it alone, why don't we adopt this guideline? So it's not really a federal law, and I didn't want to confuse the issue. It's simply a tool and a best practice model that you can adopt or not. The state of Maine, in my opinion, very wisely, the Department of Education decided they were going to adopt the majority of this 500-page manual. So this is no light lift. It's not just bits and pieces of information. It's highly, highly detailed, very inclusive. And what Cheryl went over were just a few of the things that they did not adopt. Short of that, the standards are very strict, and they would be found in that manual. So I don't know if that helps or not, but the authority for them to do that, and when we're talking about Chapter 81 and Chapter 86, come from statute entitled 29A, Section 2311. The reason that's important is because it does carry the weight of law. Any rule adopted through Title V and the Administrative Procedures Act carries the weight of law. One of the issues that we're going to talk about later is, while it carries the weight of law, if there's no penalty within a statute, it lacks the teeth. And I think that'll be more important as we talk later. But I hope that clarifies things, because I've been listening, and everyone in this room knows exactly what Cheryl's talking about, but I wasn't sure who's listening on the outside that may not be aware of what she was talking about.
Thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Lieutenant Scott, to build on that, I would assume that at that Congress are also delegates from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, because there is law, federal regulation, whatever you want to refer to it as, but published guidance that states have to follow. And so I would assume the Congress would be adopting anything.
Yeah, correct. So
contrary to that guidance.
Yep, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, those are law. So that's built from the administration itself.
Yep.
Those have to be enforced. The biggest issue that we run into is the FMCSRs aren't always applicable for school bus operations, and particularly buses that are owned by the government. So you can't hold anybody to the standard if they're in school bus operations and it's a government vehicle, which is the majority of the buses in Maine. I know that there are some that are for hire, and so the FMCSRs apply to them. The good thing with this Congress is that the state of Maine has adopted it. So even though there's no law requiring it, as soon as they adopt it and bring it in, it does carry the same weight. So there are strict standards that will at least address those that aren't engaged in commerce, because that's a pretty broad audience. I think there's between 2,300 and 28 buses in Maine, depending on which spreadsheet I look at. And we think, is it about a third, Jason, that are in commerce, roughly?
I'd say that's a safe number.
So a third of those would be in commerce. The rest would not be regulated by the FMCSRs. So
So there's contract companies in Maine that provide school
Yeah.
transportation as
Yes.
opposed to buses and operators that are municipal employees.
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. They're in business.
Yeah, there are portions of the FMCSRs, so apart from the enforcement aspects where there's a municipal carve out, I think is what you're talking about.
Yes.
There are portions that define the characteristics of buses, that define qualifications and requirements for drivers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of rounding out your point that you have a bunch of experts in there that are looking at all manner of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that goes into National Congress.
bet.
We don't just meet, we went to Des Moines, we don't just meet and suddenly vote. I mean, we have committees that work on certain portions of what's coming up or what needs to be reviewed. The last Congress was in 2015 because 2020 was COVID. So when we went in 25 last year, we had a lot of work to cover. And we're talking right now maybe of doing the National Congress like every 3 years rather than every 5 years, just to keep up with the changes with technology and everything else.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are different, but I was on a couple of different committees and we did very thoughtful work and we worked hard. And then I had to go to another committee, we read through it and we did feedback. Then all the material got sent out to everybody who was going to be a delegate. Like Bruce said, there were 5 of us that went to Des Moines, and Lane was one of the people that came with us. And I mean, we spent a lot of hours on hours making sure that, you know, things were updated or made safer, you know. So the state does usually pass, you know, we accept the specifications. But if we don't want to take all of them, we don't have to. We can pick and choose what we want to do. And the state of Maine does have their own specifications too on certain things that we also use.
So second that, just to add to that, when the Lieutenant was talking about these Congress, Lieutenant and I both went in 2015, we were delegates, so we have firsthand experience on the whole process. And it was many meetings, many long meetings and subcommittees that had to research and get information and then it had to be reviewed and then going out there. So it was quite of an experience to go out and go through that. And you can see that's that look right there. So it's definitely not, you know, it's a Bible. This is the 2025 one we were talking about that hasn't been.
Okay, because they just put another update out
Yeah.
in December, so.
Okay.
Hopefully.
So that must have been the email that you sent me with them, because you sent me an updated one, so.
Yeah.
I printed that one off.
Yeah.
There's an addition to that.
I can make sure that you get.
Okay,
another-
that'd be great.
Yeah, I can send it to everybody. Yeah, it was great, and we had to go to Des Moines, not because it's a big vacation place, it's because there was a building big enough for us to use. It was really neat, there were 49 states that were represented. We decorated our table with, because each state will decorate their table to fit the state. So we decorated our table with saltwater taffy and a lighthouse, you know, some different things. It was really neat, and we met some really great people.
Robert, you have a question?
I did, yeah. Going back to what Lieutenant Scott was mentioning, that he thinks there's 2,300 to 2,800 school buses. Some are for hire, some are owned by the government, the local government agencies. I'm assuming there's a lot of year range in there. What is there like an average life expectancy or service life of a bus that was acquired?
I used to keep some of my buses for 20 years. It all depends on how well a school maintains their buses. A lot of it depends on how much mileage they put on every year. I mean, we have some buses in the state that are 20 years old. But in order to get subsidy for a bus, it has to be at least 10 years old, and it has to have also, not or, and 125,000 miles and 10 years old. And that's for type C.
You said 125,000 miles?
Yes.
So again, those are the minimums.
Right.
They 10 years and,
Yes.
but it also then is predicated on the school district, the SAU, having some of the money to be able to pay for those. And so for larger districts, you typically will have transportation directors working with their business managers to figure out what is our cadence for purchasing. And depending on how the budget looks in any particular year, sometimes that cadence can be thrown off. And so buses, may not be purchased on the schedule that the district intends to originally.
So if I'm understanding correctly, buses that would have been purchased for this year would have been based on the 2025 spec adopted by the Department of Education.
Yes.
So
The buses are always a year ahead.
the newer ones in the fleet
Yeah.
have the safety technology,
Yes.
but there's a lot that don't have any safety technology.
Yeah. I mean, if you take and think about crossing gates, they've been around since 1963. They've been around a long time. Our state didn't specify that we had to have them until 2019, and it had to be on all buses that were manufactured 2021 or later. But a lot of the bus companies were already putting crossing gates on. A lot of the SAUs were ordering crossing gates because they saw the value. But now, I mean, they have to do it. Any bus manufactured January 2025, not meaning of 2025 bus, but manufactured
Right.
2025 has to have the door sensors.
So crossing arm, same as crossing gate, just for
Yep.
anyone who's
Yep.
listening here. Gate.
I'm just thinking in work that I've done with, from the safety perspective on commercial motor vehicles, the technology that has exploded in that industry with cameras and sensors and things. Are there any programs beyond the initial acquisition, sources of funding, grants or whatever, for people to retrofit these older buses that we're aware of today?
I'm not aware of any grants out there by companies or federally funded. I know the governor's working on
The supplemental budget.
Yeah,
supplemental
and we
budget,
can
yeah.
we're going to get to a little bit about sort of where we are with some funding recommendations that are coming up when we touch a little bit on LD 2159. I do want to make sure we answer questions, but I do want to move us forward so that we get hit on some of the statutes.
Real quick, I just want to touch base on the requirement of 125,000, 10 years. The problem that I am seeing, my team seeing, and I know directors and the superintendents are hearing this, is the requirement's great. However, it's not the nuts and bolts of the bus. It's the body and frames of these buses that are deteriorating faster, no matter whether you're spraying them down and cleaning them or you're not, that these buses are just rusting out. The problem that we see is now you're spending an amount of money to try to fix the problem that's more than the value of the bus. So I think that maybe something we should touch on that and see what we can do to make that better, because I feel like it's spending good money on bad for bad repairs because they don't last. That you can mandate it, and it's almost worth moving along and getting a new bus.
So is there an exception? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there an exception or carve out, say, for a bus that's been in a collision, that's been destroyed,
Yeah, it's
it can't
emergency
be
funding.
repaired? So there are ways to get around that.
Yes.
Should there be some extreme
Yes.
situation where you could not repair it?
Right.
Okay.
Right. But, yeah, and I know I spoke with the school district that has a bus that's 20 years old in city, and said, I'm never going to mileage it out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an emergency type of thing too.
Before we move on, I just didn't want to be rude and be a bad host. So anybody that needs to get up and use the bathrooms anywhere, all adults here, if you go out this door and just go to your left back towards where we came in, there's bathrooms over there. And feel free to do that if you have to. Yeah.
Are there any any more questions?
I have one real quick.
Okay.
What does a new bus cost?
Type C, around $140 some odd dollars. If you're talking electric, $400.
Diesel's $140,000.
And a school receives whatever their subsidy boils down to, they receive that from the state.
Can you Cheryl explain type C for everyone that's not familiar with type C?
That's a type D right there. It's flat nose. Okay, you can get a rear wheel push or front wheel pull. The regular bus that we see all the time is the type C conventional. And
So
then
they say that would be a transit,
that would be transit, yes.
and a bus with a hood would be conventional.
And then we have type A, which is minibus.
Yeah.
Just one quick add on to your comment. Can you explain to folks that when you say the subsidy that's aligned with the district, because that's actually quite telling. The differential of cost of buses for district.
Yes, I mean, a lot of it depends on,
State and local share.
yes.
And Steve, you may be in a better position to sort of explain this. I can certainly try to jump in, but basically we have an essential programs and services funding formula that sort of divides what a district pays based on the community's ability to pay. And that means if you have higher property values and a local tax base, your local community is perceived through this funding formula to say, okay, you can afford to pay more. And so there's a greater share that has to go to pay for the purchase of that bus is sort of on the shoulders of the local tax base. And the state gives some funding, it's a percentage. And so for their districts that are called minimum contributors or minimum receivers, depending on who you ask. So Steve, what is the breakdown that you see in 57?
For us, our percentage of subsidy keeps declining quickly, even though most folks would view our district as, say, a poverty district. So we receive 37% in the current budget cycle. So other districts might, Kennebunk receives, I think now under 10%. Other places, Gorham, I think, receives 62%. So throughout the state, if you were to kind of boil it all down, the state pays roughly 55%. I believe that's quite accurate.
Yeah.
So when you say the state is providing funding, it varies by municipality or district significantly.
Thank you. So inspection and maintenance, it requires that they have regular safety inspections. So Lieutenant Scott and Jason King,
The supervisor of the inspection.
Okay.
So
they send people out to schools once a year to inspect buses, and schools are expected to also do their own inspection and get someone that's certified to do it for them twice a year. It establishes maintenance standards, requires documentation of repairs, there again, saving paperwork, and it removes unsafe buses from service. There's a lot of places on a bus that Jason's people would find that a school bus driver would find because they don't get on crawlers and go into the bus like Jason's people do. So there's a lot of stuff you can't see under the bus.
Go ahead, touch base on that a little bit more. So districts has to do a inspection twice a year. That's a full inspection. We come in once a year and do a compliance inspection, which basically is 100% exactly what they're doing, other than we are not jacking the front end up to check front end parts. We don't have that capable. We could have that capability, but it's just the time frame that we have to go through the amount of buses. So my team, they throughout the state, whether it's several of them or it's two, go to the districts and go through their buses and do compliance, which ensures that the proper maintenance is being done. That obviously we're identifying out of service criteria or defective items. That we also understand that a school bus we consider it as a severe duty vehicle, like a cab, like a police car. There's things at the time of inspection that are good that we catch a month later or 2 months later, 3 months later when we come and do our compliance inspection that it might be a defect, it might be an out of service. When we look at it, probably wasn't an issue at the time of inspection, but it's a checks and balance, and it's just another set of eyes, so.
I
And we
always,
do
I
give a
always
lot of,
welcome that.
what's that?
I always welcome the inspection.
Absolutely. We have a
Because
great
yeah.
relationship with all the districts. And we hope to keep that. It's not us against them or them against us. It's a team effort. We all want safe buses. We want, it's the school bus. And I think this is a connection that gets missed is the school bus is an extension of school. You have to get them there to teach them and you have to get them home. It's just as important as everything else that goes throughout the day at that school. What happens. So we give a lot of guidance on myself and my team get a lot of calls. Hey, can you come look at this bus? Because they want that guidance of where should they go with this bus. Are we going to be, like we touched the base about, we're going to go about the repairs that need to be done or that are body or frame. But not only that, but just every aspect of what we have in our manual, what our recommendations are.
And Jason, did you mention that you don't put a sticker on at the end of your inspection?
Yes.
So that would be.
So during our
something
compliance,
different.
we do not put an inspection on. That is, those 2 times the inspection is when it's executed by the district or the municipality or the, some municipalities do not have their own garages. They bring them to a garage. They do their inspection and they place a sticker on it. That's done twice a year, 6 months apart. We do a compliance. We do not we don't fill out a sticker and put a sticker on it. We do have there's a long form that comes with the inspection that has the criteria that they go through that they have to checks and balance. We do sign off on that. So that's about the only kind of document that we fill out. We don't scrape a sticker off. My guys don't fill out a sticker and place another sticker on. So.
We might scrape it off, but we don't give them another.
Yes, we've been known to scrape them off here or there, depending on what we find. And during our, obviously when we look at it, and it turns into an investigation, meaning defects or out of service criteria we find during our inspection is coupled with mileage time. And if we can say, hey, this was there when we inspected it, then we take immediate action. We remove the sticker.
Yeah, we can't put the buses on the road until you guys come back and tell us it's okay. Yeah, works well. The qualifications and training, and people go, through Scott, not Scott, but Chris, to get their CDL. We're having a course coming up in our conference in March on, and Chris is going to be an instructor for that, people getting their CDL. So they have to have their CDLs to drive. They have to have their endorsements for P and S to drive a school bus. It mandates the initial and ongoing training and defines driver responsibilities. So a driver has to go have an annual physical every year, and then they have to have a medical card done every 2 years. So that sets that up.
Cheryl, the only thing I'd just add to that, just to clarify, so the driver who operates only, I think you guys call it type A, small school bus, so it's configured with all the safety protections. It's yellow or it's orange, whatever. But it's not a commercial motor vehicle. It's not a commercial driver license requirement. Right? That could be. We have a testing procedure to make sure they have the knowledge and the skill to operate that bus correctly, but it's not actually a full.
Well, it's based on weight. Passengers, yes.
Yep.
So if you drive a school bus and it's a mini school bus, it's 16 passengers, including the driver. You have to have CDL.
But then just from a school district perspective, I feel a lot of calls to win yesterday from a transportation director about exploring that other option on a smaller bus. How do I get somebody in the door to operate that form? It is a simpler path than trying to pursue the full federally mandated or regulated.
Yeah, and we touched on the activity bus before. It's a little white school bus, doesn't have any flashing lights, but it's got the school's name on it. And because of the driver shortage, a lot of districts are opting to buy them so that they can put a driver in that doesn't have a CDL. They have to be at least 21 years old and have to have had their license for 2 years. So a lot of schools are doing that. The good thing about the activity bus, opposed to a van, is that it's not.
I think that's an important thing that the commission should look at is the activity buses. And, what that actually is. I think there's a lot of confusion inside the school bus industry, I'll call it, right, with the
Yes.
community as to who can drive what, and the class 3 endorsement, whether with a 3 endorsement versus a passenger school bus and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I'd like to see training too.
yeah, I think some better guidance out to everybody about what that actually the requirements are. I think there's just a lot of
I
confusion.
agree. Operations and compliance, we already did that, and that's it. Woohoo!
Any questions? I'm mindful of time, because I do want to still make sure that we have a few minutes to talk about a couple of the statutes. I know the lieutenant is able to take us through every single aspect of statute in chapter 29A. But we also do want to spend a few minutes talking about where we are with LD 2159. And then we want to make sure that we have adequate time to allow for public comment. So, Lieutenant?
Sure. So I'm not going to read through. There's only 10 sections anyway from 2301 to 2311 that regulates specifically school bus operation. I think the important thing to mention is that school bus drivers follow all traffic laws. So it's the rest of the Title 29 as well. Specifically within Section 2301, it goes through your definitions. We don't need to talk about those. Everybody in this room, and certainly those that are listening, knows what a school bus is. We did talk about the activity bus, and for clarification, definition-wise, it's called a multi-function school activity bus, and it does meet the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, and it's denoted on the manufacturer's certificate of origin that it is built to meet those standards. So under 2303 is where we would talk about the school bus operator requirements. Cheryl already touched on those, so I don't think there's any questions, but if there are, I would call on Director Ireland to be able to help with any clarification or questions that you might have where that's his shop. Does anybody have questions about the actual operator requirements, the endorsements? I do know there's some confusion about air brakes. I heard it in the committee. I wasn't there to correct that, but there's comments from one of the representatives who said, oh no, if we start adding air to buses that don't have them, there's going to be an endorsement problem. And so there's no such thing as an air endorsement or an air brake endorsement. It's a restriction. So if you're operating the bus right now, that means, and you're properly licensed for that bus, the presence of air or not does not determine whether or not you need a commercial license. If it's over 26,001, you got to have it. And if it's under 26,001, you don't, including if it has air brakes. So there are air brake systems on buses that don't require commercial driver's licenses. I think that was the confusion, but everybody who's driving right now is properly licensed for the vehicle that they're in. If you were to add an air door that didn't have one, which no longer sounds like an issue, according to the DOE saying there's only 75 buses in Maine that didn't have an air door, probably a non-issue, but for anybody who has heard that there's an endorsement for air brakes and that was going to cause a problem for drivers, I would say that that's just a myth.
Yeah, I think that burden of matching the driver's qualification with the vehicle being operated sits with that transportation director. Right? In other words, we have no DMV, no understanding of what they're actually going to operate. All we do is we license them with or without restrictions and endorsements based on the tests they take and the type of vehicle they bring to the skills and road test. So if they go through that whole path, don't take the air brake written and bring a non-air brake bus, we're going to slap an air brake restriction on that license. And it's up to that transportation director to see that and not put them on a bus with an air brake, right? If they want to clarify that, they can clear it up. They can always come back, we'll reschedule them, bring a bus with air brakes, we'll clean up that restriction. That's a local burden to match that vehicle with that driver.
That makes sense. Thanks, Director. Because
Dr. Allen, can I just have a clarification? When that restriction is placed, how is that communicated to the district, or how is that communicated?
So we typically don't work much with employers.
Yeah.
I mean, right. We work with drivers. Right? So that restriction is a letter on the back of that license.
Yep.
As with the other endorsements. And it also shows up on the driving history. So if you request one of those as part of your reviews of your driver's qualifications or restrictions, so it'll be there as well. And certainly any phone call, or email from the transportation director, they don't know how to find me. So have those conversations.
When I last drove, when we did the license, when I got my new license, the school took a copy of it. So it should have all that information.
Yeah, and again, that's
yeah.
nothing we have oversight over or awareness of.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Yep.
What I'm saying is the school
Yes.
should have
Makes
that
sense.
knowledge.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, it's in your file.
I would think so.
Any other questions before I move on? So Cheryl had also touched on the different years that we had certain requirements. So 2021 and newer school buses have to have the crossing arm. In 2025 and newer have to have the anti-pinch sensors. The way the statute is written, it says that it has to be a device on the door that does not allow it to close onto a person. So it doesn't really say anti-pinch, but we're going to have to work a little bit maybe on that definition, and we'll talk more on the recommendations that we make back to both the governor and also the legislature. So under school bus markings, under 2302, I don't think there's a lot of questions on there. If there are, you folks can ask, but essentially that's telling us some of the requirements for the school buses that are in statute as opposed to rule. We understand that there's specifications that go out, but the statute has their own standards. And then in addition to statutory standards, there's the DOE rule. So you have to make sure that your buses at least meet these standards. The only question I typically get on these is when they're decommissioning a bus, they're taking it out of service, or if they no longer want it to be considered a school bus, but they still want to use it. If it's yellow and it's got a system of 8-way lights on it, it's a school bus. I don't care what size it is. You got to follow these rules. If you don't want it to be a school bus, it can't be yellow. So even when they're sold and somebody wants to do a conversion, I don't know if anybody's been asked this or heard that, they're not allowed to leave it that chrome yellow, they call it. Now, so statute says if it's wholly converted, it must be painted a color other than. Occasionally, you'll still see them out there. You'll see them using construction sites. They should not be doing that. If we know about that, we'll have a chat with them. The reason I want this group to be aware is we would not want to overstimulate an environment with a bunch of old buses that have been converted that are still yellow, that are confusing traffic. So statute addresses it. If we need to do something to clean that up, you folks can let me know.
Can I make a
Oh,
comment on
sure,
that?
please.
So would that apply also to like vehicles that are parks and recs and things like that using school buses? Is that a discussion we should have with like other entities that use the school buses that because municipalities? So
Yeah, so that's a good point. It says if it's wholly converted.
wholly converted, okay.
Meaning if you're using your school bus during the summer for other operations, and you'll see that's very common with those that are in commerce. They don't let them set for 3 months, 4 months over the summer. They're using them. As long as they're not wholly converted, they can maintain the yellow, but they have to cross out the school bus somehow has to be covered up, crossed out, can't be lit, and then they can't have that system of 8-way lights. It has to be inactive. And there's a lot of ways to get there, but they can pull the fuse, they can cover them up with something. But that was a good question. Did that answer it? And is there any
Yes,
others on
that's
that?
perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that portion of the statute of 2302? The requirements, so school bus seating, doors, and standing prohibited under 2304. It's an important one to talk about only because I believe that if this statute was being followed strictly, you would reduce the number of incidents, and quite likely, I'm going to just say it, we would not have had 2 fatalities last year. So what this says is that if the bus is in motion, the students may not be standing. That means when they're boarding the bus and they're walking back to their seat, even if they're walking to the very back row, that bus should not begin motion. If it begins motion, it's a violation of state law. It's not a policy, it's a law. Again, the statute without teeth, right? So I plant that seed to say we have to report back to the legislature and they want to know about these things and if they should create a traffic violation for those rules when they're not followed. And it's a heavy conversation, but I am going to steer that towards the traffic violation, and very specifically because when we talk about 2159, they've added some criminal elements in there that are a little bit harder to think about. So the standing passengers is very important under 2304. Also the seat belts that we touched on, that they're not required to have seat belts, but if they do have them, you have to use them. We have had times that we've inspected school buses and they've had seat belts that they took and tie wrapped underneath the seats so that they didn't have to use them. You can't. So statutorily, if they're there, you got to use them. Any questions on that?
NITS is now recommended that schools. It's
So,
coming.
so we're probably going to get there.
Yeah, I'm working with NASDIPs right now on a position paper.
That's certainly something that we should talk about wholly here.
Yeah,
And
right.
the ability for schools
Help,
to
it helps
fully
with
be able to,
behavior too.
with egress and all that stuff as well. And all the pieces that come with it as well.
I agree. There's not much on 2305 that everybody isn't aware of. They can certainly read it. If they have questions, they can get back to us on that. That's just really talking about the fire extinguisher. 2306, this conversation is important. This is school buses that are required to stop at railroad crossings. There is a common question that comes in that says, hey, if it's an exempt set of tracks, or if I don't have students on board, do I have to stop? If you're in a school bus, the answer is yes. You have to stop for every single railroad crossing, exempt or not. The only exception would be if it doesn't exist. So they have to remove the exempt sign, they have to remove the metal, they have to pave over it. If it's there, you have to stop. The confusion comes from other commercial vehicles and are not required to stop at the exempt crossings. That's probably all you need to know on that one. The 2307 is school bus inspections. We've already talked about that. They're required to be inspected twice a year by a licensed technician. That's where they receive the sticker. And then they're required to be inspected at least once a year by the Maine State Police. We may inspect them 2 or 3 times, depending on circumstances. And we certainly will do an inspection by request or after a collision. Typically, I reach out to Supervisor King right off if we know of a collision, and they say, hey, do me a favor, just get somebody down there, let's take a look at it. What we are trying to do is make sure that the defects, if there are defects, that it didn't contribute to the crash. That's very important, both for the district and for us to know. You may have a defective vehicle that had nothing to do with the crash. You want us to say that. That's, I think, an important role that we serve. We'll talk very quickly about 2308, overtaking and passing school buses. That probably needs a little bit of work, but within that section does require the school bus driver to activate the system of 8-way lights when they're picking up passengers. So boarding and deboarding, that's the only place in statute that says that you have to do something with those lights. So if they're boarding or deboarding, you have to use your lights. There's also a separate section that says, but you can't use them for any other purpose except for your driver's examination. So that 100-foot rule, that's pretty important, because for law enforcement to enforce it, the motorists have to have an opportunity to stop. And that's sometimes an issue that comes up when we're not necessarily getting full judicial support, is if the bus lights weren't on and didn't give somebody ample time to stop, that they would have passed through them. So as long as we're mindful, that's what the statute says, put them on 100 feet before your ambers come to a stop, then your reds come on.
And electric poles are 100 feet apart, so that's what I used to teach my bus drivers.
There you go. So the poles are 100 feet apart.
Yeah.
Pretty good guideline. We know it's a Class C crime if somebody operates past those red lights while you're boarding and deboarding. I will tell you that there are studies done every year, and this group's familiar with it, but I don't know if the audience is, and there's about 60,000 violations a day. Every single day across the country, 60,000 people are driving by these. We have really, really big problems with the other motorists, far more than the buses themselves. We're here to talk about the buses, and I understand that, but it is a Class C crime for the operator. If we don't know who the operator was, the registered owner is still in violation. It just becomes a traffic infraction for the registered owner, meaning we're just not sure who did it, so here's your ticket. Really, I think all that we need to talk about for statute. We already addressed section 2311, which that's that rulemaking piece for the Department of Education. The rules are major substantive. What that means is that when the DOE creates a rule, they actually have to have that legislatively approved. They can't just do a public notice and get that waived, so to speak, and then send it over to the Secretary of State's office, and that's your law. That they have a different burden, and that means anything that gets done as a result of this working group. For example, if there's a suggestion to change rule, it's not as simple as DOE saying we're going to change it. DOE goes in front of the Transportation Committee, and then the legislature decides, do they allow them to make that rule change or not?
follow-up question to the previous statute.
Yeah,
really
sure.
quickly.
Yes, sir.
Has there been any growing, especially in the past year, desire to increase the fine for passing blinking lights and also increase any sort of penalty related to your license as far as points? Because it seems as though that would be a serious deterrent, no different than running a red light or driving while intoxicated.
Yeah, so there's been several attempts over the years to increase the penalties. They have gotten it to a comfortable place. When I say comfortable, I think something that everybody agrees is realistic, reasonable, enforceable. And when they try to increase fines, it doesn't always increase compliance. And so that's something that they have to consider is the higher the fine doesn't necessarily bring down the compliance rate, if that makes sense. And so they're going to look at a fine being, if it's too excessive, law enforcement doesn't want to write the ticket. I hate to say it, but there's no other way to put it out there. We're human beings too, and you stop somebody and you have some compassion. It's one of our core values. Who pass a stop school bus. If the fine is $1,000, they may be less apt to enforce that rather than if it was at $500. So I think the legislature hit the sweet spot. There have been attempts to increase the fines, but it is a Class E crime. So they can be arrested, which is a very good tool for somebody who's operating their vehicle in a dangerous way. There are other statutes on the books that we would use to address dangerous driving behavior, like driving to in danger, or if there's impairment, operating under the influence, or criminal speed. So there are other crimes that law enforcement will use. And I think we use those kind of in conjunction. Certainly if there causes an injury or causes death, there's a separate violation where you can lose your license up to 4 years. I think it is, Director. Up to 4 years and a $5,000 fine. And that's a civil violation. So as opposed to a criminal violation, a different element, easier to prove. I could talk all day about that, but I know we got other things to talk about. Sorry. I get on a tear and look out. So I think, do we have any more questions about the statute before we jump into 2159? I think we're okay with time, don't you?
Yeah, I think we want to just make sure that we wanted to leave about 15 minutes at the end to make sure that we can go through some announcements and also talk about our next
Okay.
meeting.
Okay. So let's jump into 2159, LD 2159. And did you want to start this, or do you want me just to take care of it? Okay. So I think we're all aware of LD 2159. That started originally as an act to require all school buses have crossing arms, including retrofitting all those prior to 2021. They recognized that the law requires them from 21 forward, but that they didn't require them prior to that. So this law says all buses, period. It's emergency language, which means upon signature. So there's some issues that had to be worked out on if this were to be passed. How much time would school districts need to be able to get these properly installed and retrofitted? It's less of a problem than the amendment. The amendment came about during the public hearing that they added, in addition to the crossing arm, an anti-pinch sensor. The anti-pinch sensors we're learning, retrofitting is an issue that may be a bigger problem than your specifications on 2025 and newer. We recognize they're required to have a real quick glance at the spreadsheet. It looks like there's only about 100 buses in Maine that are 2025 and newer right now, which means the rest would have to be retrofitted. My understanding is retrofitting is a whole different animal, that the buses weren't designed that way, the doors weren't designed that way, they don't have the proper wiring and resistors. So if they require prior to 2025, it sounds like they would be a hodgepodge of aftermarket parts that would have to be added that may not work well, that may not be reliable, that may not have any testing standards or procedures. Also would require a level of expertise to install them that I don't know that we carry here in Maine to be able to do it in a short period of time. If it was pushed out 1.5 years, 2 years, I don't know if that defeats their purpose, but those are the conversations that took place, and that's what we're trying to help them with. There was a work session this week where we have been asked, this committee, if we could do a report back to them before they adjourned. So statutory adjournment is April 15th for the legislature this year, being a short session. We recognize that we have to the 30th to report back to the governor's office and the legislature. So I tried my best to say that we couldn't commit to that. I said I'm one person of a 10-person commission, but we would try to get them something rough back before their adjournment. So I'm hoping by April 10th to provide some information to them. My thought is we separate this into two places. One is we have driving behavior that we can address statutorily right now for their emergency laws. That's, I think, going to be easy. I should have said the crossing arm piece, if you don't use it, it's a Class E crime. That's what was proposed. If we separate out our recommendation back and say, look, we want to talk about driving behavior and we want to talk about vehicle equipment and technology. With vehicle equipment and technology, they really want to hear from us as soon as possible if we're going to recommend the crossing arms and anti-pinch sensors. They also want to hear back, is there something that they can do right now upon signature that would change driving behavior to increase safety? My thoughts are we direct that conversation. We only make recommendations. We obviously are not members of the Transportation Committee and we are not lawmakers. So if we provide information from this group that we feel would help change driving behavior and meet these requirements, it would be helpful. I'm going to put it out there. My thought is just going to another section within Title 29A, you end at 2311 for your section for school buses. I recommend we add like a section 2312. And within that, we just say that any violation of this section or of the DOE rule is a traffic violation. What that does is it gives teeth to the rule, it gives teeth to the statutes and the procedures, but it removes that Class E element, which is a completely different burden. I understand the goal and I understand the importance, and nobody wants to save kids more than us. But I don't think creating a Class E crime for a driver who may or may not be able to control the equipment on a bus should be on the table. I can't imagine if I was a school bus driver or driving an emergency vehicle for the Maine State Police that I do every day, that they put a burden on me that said, if I operate that vehicle and it's non-compliant, it's a Class C crime, because things happen in the middle of your shift. Your lights go out, your sirens go out. I've been headed to a call at 100+ miles an hour and everything goes out. I don't want to put myself in the position to be committing a Class C crime, and I don't want our drivers to be put in that position either. So again, this is Bruce Scott speaking. I have to be open and candid that I don't represent the entire agency. We don't vet everything that we say, but this is what I do. I am the commander of the traffic safety unit. I want to do what's best for everybody. And I just feel like we can control this through a traffic violation a lot better than through a criminal burden. In addition to the criminal burden, there is so much more that happens behind the scenes when you start talking about court and having criminal records. So traffic violations are better, they're easier. It would probably still have the same effect as a criminal violation, but it's a heck of a lot easier to understand, and there's a fine at the end of it, not a jail sentence. So I'll stop at that, and I will tell you that if we can report back to them just some very basic information, if we agree to that, we don't have to have a final draft. We could just say that we've agreed to something. And so homework, if I could ask everybody to look at Title 29A, 2301 through 2311, and decide, should we add language about procedure in addition to what's there? And then should we add that 2312 and say that not following these rules is a traffic violation? If you were to look in statute under the inspection program, so in Title 29A, Section 1770, we have that exact language. Because if a technician doesn't follow the rules, and you didn't have a violation, then we wouldn't be able to enforce that rule. So it's already there. It's well contemplated. It follows Title V and the Administrative Procedures Act, and I think that it carries weight. it's not something that's used often, but it's there and it's effective. So if it's proven and time tested through the inspection program, through licensed technicians and licensed stations, they recognize if they violate our rule that it is a traffic violation. And again, unless otherwise prescribed in statute. So you'll keep your Class C crime for the vehicle that passes the school bus. That would still stay a Class C crime because we would carve that out, but we would make sure that traffic violations for not following the rules gets embedded into that. Other than that, that's all I really could say about 2159, unless somebody has something else that they heard or wanted to make sure that we provided input back.
I was gonna ask a question. So
Yes, sir.
like with a traffic violation, I like what you're saying there versus criminal. So let's say that it was a traffic violation and then later, like accident happens, investigation plays out obviously, and they're found that somebody was negligent in something. They could also be looked at for some sort of negligence criminally if that was the correct, path forward. So it wouldn't take it off the table if that was proper, but it doesn't necessarily require to be charged of some criminally essentially.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Chris. So charging somebody with a traffic violation for not following the rules does not take away the ability for law enforcement or a prosecutor's office to bring forward criminal charges should they be appropriate. It doesn't take anything off the table. It's really just that step in between that it gives us law enforcement something, and it gives the district something. It gives them some power and some authority to say you have to follow the law, you can be fined. But I will say it cuts both ways, because the owner of the vehicle is responsible for the conduct of the operator if they're aware of it. So if the district, for example, allowed somebody to operate a bus that didn't have a proper license, they're in violation of the law as well. So both of you get charged. Well, if there's a traffic violation, it would be the same thing. So statute under 2101, it's called allowing or permitting unlawful use. So you can't permit unlawful use of a vehicle. So I bring that up it would cut both ways. And again, only if you're aware. If they're out doing things you're not aware of, that's a whole different circumstance. But to send a bus out in violation of law, and you know it, the transportation director knows it, the school bus driver said, hey, this vehicle's not compliant, and you send them out, you're both on the hook if it's a traffic violation.
That should be.
Thank you. Any other questions on that or thoughts? Anybody think this is way off and way out of line? Because I'm okay with that too. If this is overreaching, or if this is too compressed of a time frame for me to get back to the legislature by April 10th, just tell me that.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Lieutenant Scott, I don't think I have any significant concerns with what you were pitching, especially given the timeline issues that you're facing. The Dr. Assistant Commissioner were facing in front of the committee earlier this week. And I guess maybe one of my broader questions for the commission for our charter is that there are another 6 or 7 passages, portions of 29A related to suspensions and other things. So I don't know if that's within the purview of our charter to look at. It doesn't necessarily tie to that timeline, but
right.
There's more out there as well as the federal rates, because that's kind of the guardrail on some of our flexibility on state rates.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I'm supportive of what you're pitching to meet the 2150.
Okay. And that's what I was hoping is, yeah, that's what I was hoping. Something smaller, condensed, and very focused on what they were reviewing in 2159. If we can just provide feedback on this portion, I think that'll help them considerably. And I hate the thought of them trying to make a decision with all the facts. And that's what we had kind of discussed is the commission's got a ton of work to do. We don't have all the answers, but we're going to try to get them. And if we can't get back to them before adjournment, they're going to make their own decision, because they said they just don't want to push this bill off. It's a great tool. They don't want to table it. They don't want to push it to the 133rd. They want to act on it. And they recognize that because of the emergency language that it's going to be effective immediately. And I respect that completely. I just would love to be able to give them something.
And I can add one more piece to sort of what's pushing us right now is that the governor has included in her supplemental budget an initiative for $5.3 million to assist with this. So when the Transportation Committee is considering the bill, they're also thinking about a fiscal note, and they don't have that weight of that requirement because they know it's in the governor's budget. So they're worried about if they miss the window for adding the technology now, they're going to lose out on this opportunity. And the next time they try to bring something, it could likely end up on the table in AFA. So those are two pieces that are really sort of driving some of it. And obviously people's concern about, making things safer, but because there's already been a commitment in the governor's budget for that, that's driving some of the urgency. Director Ireland, I just want to clarify, because I think what I'm thinking about kind of going forward and where we are with the work of this commission is that if we are working toward having sort of like a skinny report, essentially ready to go out for the Transportation Committee to address their questions around 2159, I think we also have to recognize that by April 10th, we really also want to kind of wrap up what we're thinking about for our larger, sort of requirements and sort of responsibilities. And so I really do welcome, in our next meeting, when we are talking about, what else we have in 29A that we need to look at around licensing and everything else like that. That would be sort of where we begin to sort of unpack some of those recommendations would be in our next meeting, I think.
And I think that's a great idea. And having said that, if we could have a final report done by April 10th, we can just be done. And I'm not trying to get away from any work. I think if we did the homework in between. So Director Ireland, if there were things that you thought were important, in particular in licensing and operation, that you could bring to us so that we can all review it. And I would do the same, like with the inspections, if there's recommendations, I would ask MAPTA to help us, like take a look at the inspection manual and see if there's recommendations there. Because if we did the homework, brought the recommendations back, then we can discuss those as opposed to trying to do a line by line. We would probably not have time to get that done by April 10th. But if people are willing, and I certainly am, if people are willing to take some homework and then get back to this committee, I think we can pull this off and be thorough and complete by then too. I get one smile.
Like
Nobody's
it.
saying no.
I like it.
I'm sweating. I'm sweating. But
I am too.
Yeah. So,
It is going to require, it's a heavy lift, but I think we can do it if we all spend some time in our own areas. And we've got some really, really good people in the room that can help us.
I would like to, if it is okay with members of the commission, if we don't have any other questions, I want to make sure we have some time for some public comment. And what I'd like to do is to provide some time for members of the public to address the council or the commission, I mean. And at this point, if we could limit sort of the time for each speaker to about 2 minutes. I know that's not very long. We'll do our best, but we just want to make sure that we provide opportunity for anyone who would like to speak to be able to speak. So what I'd ask folks to do is if you could raise your hand, then what I'll do is I'll promote you to a panelist, and that will allow you to speak. I would just remind everyone that this is a public meeting, and anything that you share obviously is recorded and will be included also in our we have a website, and I'll talk this out at the end, but these meetings are recorded, and we will be putting the recording on our website also for public consumption. So I want to start by reading. Andrew Weissman is in one of the folks in attendance, and he wrote in the comment, I work for Mazer USA, a company whose expertise is in anti-pinch sensors for buses. If you need any input regarding the anti-pinch sensors, feel free to put me in. As Lieutenant Smith just mentioned, the original anti-pinch rule was very ambiguous, and the verbiage should be improved. Some of the solutions currently comply with the regulation are not anti-pinch sensors, and I fear they will not protect children like planned. Mazer recommends that the new regulations include a test specimen that can be tested in every inspection to ensure compliance. An example test specimen is 1 or a 1/2 inch rod metal bar. Is there anyone in the attendance list who would like to make a public comment? See Andrew raising his hand. I'm going to move you into the panelist, Andrew. All right. Are you able to speak? Come off mic, Andrew?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I just kind of wanted to introduce myself, but as that message just said, I work for Miser and we kind of specialize in anti-pinch sensors. And I just wanted to let you guys know, I feel like the pinch sensors for school buses is a relatively unknown thing for most people. And I wanted to provide our expertise kind of on the whole Maine retrofit. We've been following it very closely. And as I mentioned, I've seen some of the solutions that have passed for 2025, the original regulation, and they're really not accomplishing what they should be, which is, you know, being able to detect a kid stuck in the door. For example, one of the big OEMs, their solution is simply just a latch that once a vehicle starts moving and gets to a certain speed limit, then it indicates if the door is open. But that's not really solving kind of the issue at hand here. But Miser, my company, has been working with the three big large OEMs on a preliminary solution. We're kind of just looking for some more details as this progresses in terms of how to implement this solution. The sensors is actually the easy part. It's more so the wiring and what vehicles will need a control unit or a relay to register those signals. But Miser also provides that solution as well. And we've already begun the process with the three large OEMs on developing a solution.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Would you be available for a short presentation at a later meeting so that you can kind of go over the nuts and bolts and maybe I don't know if you have a small video or some schematics or something to just educate us so that we can make a really good decision that's informed when we report back?
Yeah, I would love to meet with you guys at a later date. I'm in California right now. I'm traveling, so I don't have everything prepared with me, but I'm available for a meeting whenever it works best for you, and I can kind of show you a short presentation of what we do and our experiences and things like that.
Thank you.
Do we have any other attendees who would like to make public comment? Seeing none, we did have a letter that was submitted to us. We've had a couple of letters that, sorry.
Could I just ask, is Director Stewart available to come in for a moment and just introduce herself?
Yes.
Only just a couple of minutes, yep. But she's a really important part of our team. She's the director of the Bureau of Highway Safety, and she has a ton of information as it pertains to occupant protection and younger operators. I think she could just briefly tell us a little bit about what she does.
Yes, she.
If we can get her.
Director Stewart, are you able to speak? I can see you're unmuted, but I cannot.
Yes. Hello.
There you are.
There we are. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. My name is Lauren Stewart. I am the Highway Safety Director for the Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Highway Safety. And I've really enjoyed listening to you all this morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here and listen in. One of the things that I hope that we can talk about later as our meetings progress is more about those seat belts in school buses and some of the trainings that we've been doing with the Department of Education and how important that is in the world of bus safety, if you will. I realize it's a bit beyond the scope of what the committee was originally here to discuss, but if we can offer additional recommendations regarding training for school bus drivers, school districts, et cetera, on the requirements for seatbelts in school buses. As the lieutenant said, if they have them, they have to be used. But the issue is that most often they are not being used correctly, which plays a huge role in safety. So I'm here hoping that we can maybe offer some information to you all regarding that in the future.
Thank you so much, Director. We appreciate that.
We did also have a letter submitted to us by Matthew Kearns. It is a little bit long, so I'm not going to read the entire thing, but he identifies a number of concerns related to adding some of the technology to the buses, given sort of the range of age in the different the fleets of different SAUs. And sort of walks through some of those concerns. For the purposes of public comment and information that is shared with us, what we will be doing is we have launched this a website on the Department of Education webpage. You can find that if you go to the transportation page. And that is where we will be putting information related to any of the documents that we're putting together here. Everything that we're looking at is where we'll have also the recordings, but any public comment that is submitted to the commission will also be published there. So give me a second so I can pull up Mr. Kearns' note. So some of the areas that Mr. Kearns kind of points to is sort of the school bus equipment standards and manufacturer capabilities, pointing out some of the concerns that Lieutenant Scott addressed a little bit in terms of if we were to adopt any kind of a timeline for requiring anti-pinch technologies, particularly if there's retrofitting, some of the concerns that Lieutenant Scott sort of mentioned. And same thing with sort of the explanation about the crossing arms. Are a significant difference in terms of it's much easier to install those and to retrofit those. The anti-pinch sensors become much more complicated. What I would recommend for the commission is that we make sure that we review this letter, especially heading into our second meeting, given sort of the nature of the comments that he has made. So that will be available, and it will be posted on our website probably the next day or so. So you'll be able to check that out there as well. Yes.
There was another hand raised.
Okay.
In our attendee list, that hand has come down, but I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
One more rally.
Thank you. Was there someone in the attendee list who would like to make public comment? I know that may have been Director Stewart. I saw her hand go up and then we pulled her in. So I wasn't sure if that was it. Maybe not.
It was,
oh, okay.
yep, do you see it now?
Yep.
Oh, great.
Alicia, are you able to speak?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. So I have seen the anti-pinch sensor from Andrew. I think it'll be a great idea. He did send me a video on it as well. I could try to see if I could find that video in the meantime and send that to you. I think would be a great idea for the sensors and the arm bars. I also think a lot of the issues nowadays with the drivers is, they have all these kids on the bus. They're not babysitters. They're school bus drivers. They're supposed to be driving the bus and paying attention to the road. I think they also need to have like an aide on the bus to help with, the children on the bus. They can also help younger kids load and unload. So I think that would be a good thing too, to add to that. And, it would be another set of eyes on the bus for them as well.
Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Bruce, your hand's up, but I'm.
I don't know how that happened. Let me put it down.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. My name's Jennifer Foster.
Hi, we can hear you.
Hi, I have my hand raised. My name's Jennifer Foster. I am advocating for the families of Braden Callahan and Simon Gonzalez. So I want to say thank you so much for all of you for allowing me to be a part of this with you. Sit back here and listen. I have been at the work session of not in person, but we were able to view it the other day. I was at the testimonies in January. Wiseman is amazing. Andrew, I've met him personally along with Alicia. She was the former president of the Angels of Hope for bus safety. I am now the president, unfortunately. Anyway, the thing here is with the LD 2159, the anti-pinch sensors are huge. We need to really address that. Simon's hand was caught in that door and he was dragged down the street and he was run over by his bus. The features that he had on his bus were none. It was a 2022. I did look that up. And Braden's bus was a 2022 also, which should have had the arm bar, but it was disabled. We need to look at having it be some sort of crime to disable these safety features because you're tampering with a vehicle and their safety features. So I'd like that to be looked at a little bit too. I know the families would really like to see some changes made with the emergency bill. If you guys are able to assist with giving any type of direction, I understand money all comes into play, but Governor Mills has been gracious enough to offer funds to go towards these type of things. So I hope you guys can get this all taken care of before April 10th. I appreciate you letting me stop in here. Thank you again. That's all. If you have any questions for me ever, let me know. And also, if you have any questions for the family, I can get you in touch with them also if you have any. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer.
Appreciate you.
Right. With that, I'm going to close public comment and just do a couple of announcements and sort of making sure that we do some housekeeping and next steps. As I mentioned before, there is a website that is where we're going to be keeping everything, including new information, but we'll also be sending information out to you by email. But everything that we share will be also available to the public as well. The recording for this, yes.
So I just wanted to add also that MAPT did, the board of directors did submit a letter as well.
Okay, great. And we will make sure that we post that as well. Okay. For our next meeting, we've had some challenges with our doodle polls and trying to get those out to everybody. And so we're looking at, we can set up another doodle poll, but it would be wonderful if we could find a time right now to schedule. And I'm wondering if Fridays would work for people. And I'm thinking about Friday the 13th, which is a terrific day. I think I was former middle school principal for a lot of years, and these were always the days that I had to spend time telling my teachers it's not that bad. Full moons are a different thing, but would this time from 9 to 11 on the 13th work for members of the commission?
Yep.
I should check my calendar too. Great. So we will plan on our meeting here 9 to 11. Bruce, do you know if this room is available?
If it's not, I'll get us a room.
Okay,
I'll make sure that we
great.
have something available.
And so as we mentioned before, I will follow up with a more detailed agenda, but for our purposes of our next meeting, we really are looking at bus specifications, sort of focusing on statute around 29A, as well as kind of digging back into Rule Chapter 86. If I could perhaps lean on my co-chair, Lieutenant Scott, as well as perhaps Director Ireland, and obviously also Cheryl Brackett, and also our friends from MAPT to help with some of that work. But I think what I'll do is I'll reach out to you in the coming. What Lieutenant and I will do is we will sit down and talk about sort of how we want to scope that meeting out, and then we may follow up with some gentle invitations or voluntelling you to maybe do something or prepare something. And then last but not least, also wanted to let folks know that we have set up an email address or an email box for the purpose, again, of public communication, and that will also be added to our website. Lieutenant Scott, what am I missing?
I was going to see if we could bug these folks to locking down the next date as well, because if we can get in the calendars now, we're going to be more successful.
Let's do it.
Even if, I think we really need 3 more meetings before we do a report back.
Okay.
I don't know how tight everyone's schedules are for Fridays, but we got the 13th locked down. Can we lock down the 20th and the 27th? The reason I asked that, we could potentially have everything that we need for information by the 27th, which gives 2 weeks to get some documentation together.
Every Friday in March.
Every Friday in March, if everyone else is available, and I don't want to speak for you either.
Yeah.
I know you got a ton going on.
The 20th is a little bit harder, and I
Okay.
know it's harder for also for Superintendent Marquis.
Can we do the 19th, Thursday, the day before?
I can make that work.
Yes.
19th would work.
Can you guys make that work?
19th. Okay.
Wayne, I have not been doing a good job of asking you if that's going to work for you. No, we're going to second. So one meeting is the 13th and then the 19th.
So we've got 3/13 and 3/19. And let's look at the following week. And I haven't seen Wayne take his microphone off, but if you're in there, Wayne, do those dates work for you? 3/13 and 3/19?
We'll say 9 to 11. Sorry, Wayne, did you say that?
You're back on mute, Wayne, sorry. We heard you for a second and then you disappeared.
How about now? Can you hear
Yep,
me?
we got you now, Wayne.
Yep.
Okay, I'm good on all those dates.
All right. So we got
Okay.
the 13th and the 19th.
And do we want to look at the following week, either the 26th or 27th? That'd be Thursday or Friday.
27th is better for me.
Okay. Friday, the 27th.
27th works for me.
And even if it's the majority, we recognize that getting everybody is
Yeah.
difficult, but all we need is 6 to have a quorum so that we can at least vote on minutes and any other decision. So
9 to 11. Oh.
if that works for everybody.
Yep. Yes.
Yep.
We want to add that. So we'd wrap up on the 27th.
Yeah.
With a possible, like, and we'll check in as we go in to see if we need to have another thing for meetings. But I think our goal was to get through 4 meetings and get through what we need to get through. So what we'll look to do next week would be or 2 weeks from now on the 13th would be to talk about specifications, and then following that we would be looking at training, best training, and again, in each of these we'd be talking about any updates to rule that also. Yes.
As a heads up, so on the 19th, I'll have to remote in,
Yep.
but I'm available during that block.
I'm hoping we're going to have it all worked out.
Yes,
All the bugs are
okay.
going to be worked out by then.
Any questions or comments?
I go to DC on the 13th, but I'm thinking that my airline doesn't leave. So I'll have to-
Well, that's to be kind of difficult, but maybe at the airport you could remote in,
Yeah.
perhaps, if you bring your computer or phone. The only other thing I would say while we have everyone locked in is, are there some tasking assignments that we'd like to do right now? So that they're prepared, where these meetings are pretty close together. And so for chapter 81 and chapter 86, I just think that we need to have that reviewed and have any recommendations for changes in statute, and recognize that you've done the adoption for the majority of the Congress, so that's not really going to require any more work. It's just a matter of, do you feel your statutes or your rules under 81, 86 are solid. So that's kind of a DOE thing.
Yeah.
But anybody obviously can look at any of this
Right.
and provide feedback and input. We just want to make sure that we know who's doing what.
Right.
I've left too many meetings in the past and wasn't sure I had a takeaway and did. And then we don't talk about it to the next meeting, like, oh, that was mine.
Yeah.
So would we bring these review and recommendations with us to the next meeting, or we submit them ahead of time for review?
If we could get them ahead of time, share it with the group.
Yep.
And then we can at least post it and then talk about it at the following meeting.
So the people who are responsible for the review of 81 and 86, everyone is invited to, but the people who are kind of carrying that, Department of Ed humans. And Steve, if you could also look at those, and then obviously Mitzi and Chris as part of that feed, you could also.
I think, maybe the question I have, the clock ticking on it. As I look at the commission's charter purpose portion, there's a number of those verbs that start to B through G are identifying, encouraging, confirming, but there's a produce. Okay, it's set as best practices. So to me, that's work.
It is.
Right. I mean, it is all work, but I mean, in terms of having it originate something that does not currently exist. So I think about our time.
Yeah.
Trying to chase that LD down, provide what we get back to that transportation. That to me is a work set unto itself that probably we want to start tasking some things out now to start getting at it.
That's a good point. That is really going to be the core of that third meeting is, as we look at, and so part of when we're looking at 81 in particular, we can identify that we may need to spell out more about exactly what trainings need to be there and, what is there and what isn't. And then once we have what those are, then the third meeting, we really want to spend that time. So as we're starting to think about, that's going to come up really quickly. That's going to be the 19th, where we're going to want to say, all right, if we already know that we want a mechanism for enforcement related to the trainings that are being done. And then, I know that MAPT has talked with, the Maine School Safety Center and Department of Ed about, what is required for training and can we produce, what those training materials are. And that's something that I think we need to be ready to do. I don't know that in the time of this commission, in the 5 weeks that we have, that we'll be in a position to produce all of those. We can point to some of those documents, but in our discussions, I think part of what we've learned is that they're kind of in a lot of different places. And so we'd be pulling together a lot of different training materials. But that's a definitely important thing to flag is that, that is one of the key elements we have to produce.
Yeah, and I think from a training perspective, I think that there's certainly things, and I think that was identified in the MAPT letter, things that, that could be produced. And I think that you could look at a framework, producing a framework rather than all the training documents themselves to say what you have to meet for, training, things like that, some minimum standards of it, and then allow that stuff to be created locally, shared, plagiarism, all that stuff to the different districts. It's encouraged. Yeah.
I guess maybe to Chris's point, and I'm looking forward to the letter that the association has come up with. You guys, great thinking. Is it within the realm of the authority of this commission to task agencies, which, in other words, to what extent do we actually have to produce things, or can we recommend a DOE is supported by DPS, VHS, and DOE shall by such date produce X, right? And then between the governor and the Secretary of State, we sit outside the governor, we can come forward and then work for those things as agencies. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense rather than trying to kill ourselves? We identify the work that needs to be done, set some suspenses and task some agencies.
I think it does. And I think when I introduced myself, I didn't say I was the vice president of MAPT also. I probably should have clarified that as well. So I speak from that side. I just want to be careful for MAPT that we're happy to provide a lot of input and, collect some information from other districts. We really shouldn't be the ones that are making the frameworks and things like that, providing suggestions. It really does need to come from, an authority level to say, you will do this, right? Instead of us saying, hey, this is a good idea, Right.
And so certainly it can be agencies, but I think your point, Director, is well stated that what it is likely the commission is able to do is to say, you shall do this, and say to the Department of Education, you're going to put these standards into, identify the standards, put them into place, through a process, where we invite experts in the field, and partner with that. And so what are the trainings that are going to be required? What is the substance? And then do that. But I think that's going to be ultimately what we're producing, is going to be that recommendation to do that work.
I think you'll find that a lot of this stuff, though, like I said, a framework would help, right? And I think you find a lot of this stuff in the field. It exists. There's a lot of great trainings. There's certainly some things that there's some gaps on, but I think collectively, Mitzi and I see, and Cheryl sits on some of these emails with the group of directors around the state. There's a lot of good training. There's stuff that's really needs to be developed still, but yeah, I think there's something there that can help already.
Yeah. And I think there's some statutory authority already that exists based on the adoption of the National Congress, because if you look in there, there are best practices, and there are tons of best practices. So maybe we just need to try to glean from those where they already have the weight of law, and just make sure that we're educating and enforcing it, because we haven't really done a great job at that. As far as the state police, we do motor vehicle inspections, so we look at the bus and make sure it's compliant, but we're not looking at operation. I think that we really get involved in that very often, unless there's something roadside. There's a big problem.
I'll send everybody the new copies, because they had to fix some things. So the books that they sent to us, we had to trash those, and then they sent us another book.
Okay.
And then they found something else. So the latest one came out in December, so I'll send everybody a copy of that today.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I'm aware we've gone over time, but I appreciate everyone's attention. Lieutenant, anything else we want to?
No, other than I just wanted to let everyone know under 2159, the real scope is just in 29A right now, from 2301 to 2311. That's what I've been asked by the committee to report back on, because the requirement for the crossing arm would be germane to that entire section. And so they want to know, what do we do about school bus operations specifically? Right. And if we can just get that part really ironed out, I think we're going to be in great shape. And I will work with Melanie Furman. She's the legal analyst for the Transportation Committee, because that was what was asked of Senator Nagel, if I would work with Melanie, come up with some recommendations. So I'll take on that task and then share it with the group on what I have, and I'm open to anything else for suggestions that we can get back to them.
And you had already given us that homework to make sure that we were reviewing 2301 to 2311.
Yep.
And so we're all invited to do that.
Okay. Yes, but I will take the task, so I know it gets done.
Yes.
I don't want to fail you guys and not have it ready. I think that's it. Does anybody have anything else? Very mindful of your time. Appreciate it. I can't thank everybody enough. And I don't know if I've said this in front of this whole group, but no one of us is smarter than all of us, and I can't thank people enough for their participation. This is a really great opportunity for all of us to do something meaningful. And I just don't want to screw it up. I want to do it right. So I'm glad you're here. I invited my support staff for that same reason. I don't feel qualified to make all these decisions on my own, yet frequently you're asked to. And so thank you. Thank you for bailing us out. Do not be shy. Tell us what we need to hear. And let's make sure that we get a report back that's meaningful, that really comes from all of our hearts, our expertise, and our experience. So thank you all.
I get a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Motion by Lieutenant Scott, a second. Lieutenant Marquis. To adjourn. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.